I got more interested in the types of questions that we could ask beyond tell me about you at your best. As you see further down, I then started to realize the more I read about solutions-focused practice, there were other related questions that we could ask the players to draw out of them and surface their strengths and their qualities. So as you can see here in these 5 bullets, what are you most proud of the way you play? What did it take to get good at that? So not just talking about what you're good at, but what did you do to get good at that? When did you first notice yourself getting good at that? What do you know about yourself that tells you you can get even better? So starting to ask there about, are you aware of the qualities that you have that mean that you're going to keep training in a focused way? The players hearing themselves answer these questions is where the potential for change and growth lies, I believe. I'm calling it solutions-focused brief therapy in team sports. I put team like that because I do also talk about using SFBT in an individual sport too. So, but we will talk, there will be, if time allows, 4 ways that I've used solutions-focused brief therapy or solutions-focused practice in football specifically, because that's my background. So let's get going. I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey of how I got to using SFBT in sport now, and it goes back quite a long way. And this is me here. Back in the 80s, I was a professional footballer in my youth. So I was involved with professional clubs from the age of 14 to about 22. First with Chelsea as a schoolboy player, and then with my old club and my hometown club, Bournemouth. And their stadium looked very different then, and we all looked very different then, different haircuts and everything. But that's me there. And so I started off a professional sporting career, had all kinds of injury problems, and for me it was all over by the age of 22. And to be honest, the sport just started to become less important to me. I changed where I lived. I needed to think about getting a new career, got married, children, and sport just became less important. I discovered a new sport, table tennis. Randomly started playing table tennis when I joined a company that had a table tennis table, and took to this sport very quickly. I started reading a lot more around this whole area of performing well under pressure and managing yourself well. So that led to being asked by the table tennis club that I've been working with in Brighton, just as on a volunteer basis, to ask me if I would work with their young people in their development program. Brighton Table Tennis Club is a fantastic community facility that runs a very difficult but really well. They run this narrow line of producing really top quality players, but at the same time being community-based, inclusive for all club. And so I was working with their young people because they were finding it particularly difficult or challenging to go to tournaments and compete at the level that they would normally be able to. So that was happening. And then this book was very influential to me too. So just for those who've arrived late, just going on a quick whistle-stop journey of how I got to using solutions-focused brief therapy in sport. And this was one of the stopping points. And this book was really helpful to me, opened up my thinking to the whole idea of errors and mistakes are integral to the learning process, and they're not to be feared, they're to be embraced, and to try, fail if necessary, assess, adjust, try again, do it differently, do it better, and then repeat. And so that book, and then the Steve Peters book I was using to create a syllabus at the table tennis club with the juniors. And then what happened next was I met online this guy, Dan Abrahams. Now, again, if you're a fan of all things sports psychology or people handling themselves well in sporting situations, I can't recommend Dan's podcast enough. It's absolutely fantastic. He has a global audience, and I think he's brilliant. He has a wide variety of guests, which makes it so interesting. And because of one of his guests, being Paul Z. Jackson, that's where SFBT came in. So I'd been going along this path of working with these young table tennis players, trying to, if you like, persuade them that they could manage themselves better, to give them tools to manage themselves better and cope with pressure, and trying to create a culture of embracing or accepting that failure or mistakes are part of the process of getting better. But for me, and I was enjoying it, and it was all very cerebral and cognitive. Yeah, I think I did a good job. But when I suddenly came across Paul's podcast with Dan, it opened my eyes to something. And even though I didn't really fully understand what was going on, I intuitively knew there was something valuable that I could use to help these young people at the table tennis club. And what Paul did was, on this podcast, Dan Abrahams, the host, had already been on training with Paul and Paul's partner, his business partner or colleagues, Mark McCurgow, who's also part of this conference. And so Paul explained what solutions-focused brief therapy is, its history, the main tenets, and so on. But he's not involved in sport at all. But he told the story of when he was actually working in Sweden. He was invited to go and speak to a Swedish hockey team while he was there. And he says in the podcast, he knows absolutely nothing about ice hockey. He agreed to go. And all he did was, with the team sitting around in the meeting room, he asked them, when is your next game? At the weekend? Okay. Well, if I was to watch you and you were performing as a team at your very best, everybody in optimum form, what would I see? What would I notice that told me that you were performing at your best? And he started collecting descriptions from the players, probably the coaches too, but I think he was focusing on the players. And he introduced this idea of gathering evidence for why people are already functioning at a very high level. And he introduced the what else question. So he probably asked what else 25 or 30 times, really requiring the players to think about what it is that they show and do when they're at their best. And I instinctively knew this was going to be helpful to me. So I immediately took it back into the table tennis realm. Here's Marlon, one of the best table tennis players in the world right now. So I took it back to the table tennis club, and instead of concentrating on tools to try and remain or to deal with pressure well, although those were valuable, I started asking the players, if I was to watch you at your best, what would I see? And what else would I see? What else would I see? What else would I see? To gather evidence for themselves, to be able to see that they were actually, through their training, had been acquiring a high level of competence. And a lot of it they hadn't even noticed. And what I want to say at this point is that, having worked in sport on and off for so many years, and I'm sure many of you have joined this workshop because for the same reason that you're involved in sport or have been. I'm very aware of the fact that even though encouragement is thought about and known about, there's the prevailing thinking in terms of getting better at something is, where do you still need to improve? What do you need to work on? And I think pretty much everybody carries around the thinking that, yeah, I know I'm good at these things, but, and in reviews, in player reviews and athlete reviews, everybody's sort of got this expectation of, we start with, these are the things you're good at, and these are the things that we need to work on. And I'm not saying that that shouldn't be that way, but that prevailing way of thinking often means that people struggle to really be in touch with the excellence that they already have. So I started wanting to build up the table tennis players' confidence more than trying to give them things that would protect them from the stress of competition, because my reasoning was, the more confident these guys are, the less room there will be for self-doubt. So there still may be self-doubt to deal with, and no doubt there is, and there still may be technical things to work on, and of course there will be, but let's build that on a foundation of nurturing self-confidence and belief. And we did that in two ways. Looking backwards to your best recent match, gathering evidence from what you've done that's working well, but also regularly thinking about your dream game. And if you were playing in your dream game, what would I see? If all of your training was just working for you in your next match, what would be happening that told you everything was coming together, everything was working as it should, which is such an important part of players and athletes reaching for what the next level is. And so often with the young table tennis players I was working with, if you asked them what they needed to do to get better, what they could do is recite what their coach had told them. And that's okay, but we could do far better than that by asking them to imagine what their dream game would look like and place themselves from a visualization point of view and a deep concentration point of view into what that dream game would consist of in great detail. So we'd drill down into the detail of, and when you played that way, how would you feel? If your topspin forehand was working in the way you describe, what effect would that have on your opponent? What would you notice about them that told you your forehand was really effective? And so we'd go into that level of detail so that it became something that they could relate to as an experience rather than just have on their development plan as an item that they should try and aim for. So we looked back for evidence of best recent match, and we looked forward to what the dream game would look like. And then I got more interested in the types of questions that we could ask beyond, tell me about you at your best. As you see further down, I then started to realize the more I read about solutions-focused practice, there were other related questions that we could ask the players to draw out of them and surface their strengths and their qualities. So as you can see here in these 5 bullets, what are you most proud of the way you play? What did it take to get good at that? So not just talking about what you're good at, but what did you do to get good at that? When did you first notice yourself getting good at that? What do you know about yourself that tells you you can get even better? So starting to ask there about, are you aware of the qualities that you have that mean that you're going to keep training in a focused way? The players hearing themselves answer these questions is where the potential for change and growth lies, I believe. At least that's my understanding without being a specialist at all in the neuroscience of this. But it's connected, I think, with that also with people hearing themselves describing the future they want rather than being told the future they should want, which tends to be more effective. And then finally, what do you love about your sport? Because we were always really keen for these young players to, however ambitious they were, we wanted them to be able to be in touch with probably the reason that they were there in the first place, which is they just love playing. And so we'd get them to express that from time to time, to sometimes counterbalance the stress of hard training and high expectations. So what I'd be really interested to do, or for you to do, is I'm going to put you into a breakout room with one other person. What would be great is if one of you was prepared and happy to be the interviewer, and the other, perhaps who plays sport or who used to play sport, and it doesn't matter to what level, but a sport that you've enjoyed and got better at. What I'd like to do is for you to experience what it's like for somebody to quiz you on these questions that you see at the top here. If I were to watch you playing at your very best, what would I see? What would I notice about you that told me this is you at your best? And ask at least 5 more times, well, what else would I see? What else would I see? I've done this up to 30 questions is my record with people, but I'm only going to ask you to do 5. And you might also want to pick out some of these to see what impact these have. I'm only giving you 10 minutes, and that will fly by pretty fast. So that's only enough time for one person to be interviewed. And you can get to choose, of course, who is the interviewer and who is the interviewee. You might want to take a photo of this slide if you've got your phone handy, just to help you remember what these questions are. But even if you only answer these at the top, if I were to watch you playing at your very best, what would I see? What else? What else? What else would I see? And what else would I see? Up to 5, that would be great. So, stop sharing. Breakout rooms. All right, thank you. So I was taking you on a journey of how I got from there to here. And the next thing that on my journey was getting some training with the brief group in London with Chris Iverson, Harvey Ratner and Evan George. So I'd been reading as much as I could get hold of on solutions focused stuff, and then did a 4-day course with the brief guys in London, and this really helped me tremendously and opened my eyes to 3 particular things that I grasped the importance of, I think, and made a big difference to me and what I was doing. And those 3 things were noticing, interaction, and scales. So I just thought I'd have some fun with this chap, with him noticing things. More about interaction, the fact that working with the table tennis players in an individual sport, although I'd occasionally refer to the interaction with an opponent and the difference that they might make on them and explore that a little bit, what I hadn't ever done was explore the interaction between teammates, which I was really beginning to want to do. And I was also beginning to see, because I'd seen expert use of scales from the brief team, and I could see the value of those. I thought these are perfect for using in the football environment, which I found myself being drawn back towards. And so what I'd like to do now is to actually run through a conversation I had with a 17-year-old footballer who was struggling with confidence, particularly around an element of their game. And that was, they were a midfield player, a very competent one, but he seemed to have lost confidence, and going with that, seemed to have lost the ability of receiving the ball with his back to goal from a defender, let's say, and then turning immediately to go forward in an attacking manner. And he'd just become too afraid of receiving the ball with his back to goal and then turning in case he got tackled and gave the ball away. So we were having a conversation about that, and what I'm going to do is, in storytelling fashion, I'd like to read this conversation to you. I hope it works well for you that I'll read it out loud and that you follow me as I read it. And then we'll just see what I'd like you to perhaps pay attention to is bear in mind that there were three things that really started to come to the fore for me after my time with Brief, noticing interaction and scales. Try to notice those coming up more in a way that I never really used, particularly with the table tennis players, but felt more comfortable using with this footballer, which for me was a sort of a milestone discussion. So here we go. So I said to him, I'd already asked him about how he tried to turn with the ball, and he clearly knew what he was doing. So I said, so it seems you know what you need to do. Yeah, I just don't trust myself. I end up just playing it backwards or sideways to be safe. Okay, so if we spend a bit of time discussing this now and it's helpful, how will you know it's been helpful? What will be different? I suppose I'd feel less anxious about that part of my game. I'd trust myself more. And what would you be if you were less anxious about it? I suppose I'd be more confident. Yeah, more confident about it. Okay, so if we chat around this topic and at the end you feel more confident about turning with the ball and you trust yourself more, would that be good? Yeah, definitely. Okay, so on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is you are 100% confident of your ability to turn when you can, and 1 is the opposite, where would you put yourself now? About a 3, maybe a 4. Yeah, a 4. A 4, okay. Why a 4, not a 1? Well, I can do it. I mean, I have done it well at times, so I can do it. Okay, what else makes it a 4? I can picture myself doing it. It seems easy when I picture it. What else? It matters to me. I really want to do this better. I'm not going to give up. You mentioned that you have done it, so you know you can do it. Tell me about one of those times. Can you remember a particular match? Yeah, it was early in the season and I was just having one of those games when I felt confident and things were working. Confident? How did that show? I just felt I could do more or less what I wanted. I didn't care about making mistakes. I just tried things and most seemed to work. How else did your confidence show? I wanted the ball the whole time, calling for it, getting into good positions. Okay, what else? If something didn't work, I didn't care. It didn't affect me. I just wanted to get back on with the next thing. What was the benefit of you responding that way? Not caring if things didn't work? Yeah. Well, I suppose it meant I kept trying things. I kept doing positive things, the right things. What benefit was that to your teammates, you not caring about mistakes and still trying? I suppose it was a good example. Okay, what else? It maybe gave them confidence to be positive. We were all positive that day. I can't say it was down to me though. When they were positive, how did that affect you? It made me want to make even more happen. I wanted to be at the center of it. And what about the person you were up against? What effect did you have on them when you played this way? He couldn't get near me, or hardly ever. I dominated him. How did that show? What could you see that showed you were dominating him? Well, you could see him getting disheartened. He started moaning about things, and I think he gave up by the end. And what effect did that have on you? I loved it, just wanted to pile it on. This sounds like you close to or at your very best. Ah, yeah, it does. It probably is. So tell me about turning with the ball that day, when you were at your best. It just worked. I was sharp, I was confident, I was having fun. I did everything without thinking too much. I just did things. I mean, I probably did get caught out once or twice, but it didn't bother me. I just got on with it. Okay, so you know what it feels like to be confident in turning and not caring if it doesn't work every time. You know you can ignore those and keep playing positively. Yeah, I'd kind of forgotten I can do that. And you know what a confident you looks like, the things you do, the effect you have on your teammates, your impact on the opposition. Yeah, I've got a good sense of it right now. Okay, so on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is 100% confident that you can play that way again, and 1 is the opposite, 0 confidence you can play that way again, where would you put yourself? Right now, an 8. Okay, why an 8? Because I know I can do it. It's not hard, I've done it. More than once, not just that game, for periods in other games. Okay, why else an 8? I want more matches like that. That's how I see myself playing. That's who I want to be. In my head, that's who I am. Okay, why else are you an 8? I can picture it. It's within my grasp. I just need to own it. Okay, why else an 8? I know I've got the ability. I know what to do. I've done it already, so I've got what it takes. Okay, you said just now, in my head, that's who I am. Give me 3 words that describe who you are when you play that way. Just 3 words. Lively, carefree, okay? Sharp, sharp and dominant. Can I have 4? Lively, carefree, sharp and dominant. Great. Okay, so I hope you noticed in that session that it was for me a big step on to reach the point where I was able to ask a player about what difference it made to them and to others when they were performing at their best, but also to be able to scale, to be able to see, you know, where are you now, surface the things that keep them where they already are on the scale, which was a brand new concept to me, because in my sporting background, scales were always, where are you and why aren't you higher? And what do you need to do to get higher? So it was a revelation, and it still is a regular revelation to the people that I work with now when they see a scale used that way. And then to return to it or something similar to it at the end, and for them to give evidence for the reasons why they're more confident, was a big step on for me, and really what this conversation, and by the way, I should say I cleaned up this conversation. There was a lot of much more thinking time going on, and a repetition of questions from me, but to make the script more user-friendly, I've cleaned that up. So it took longer than that, and it was hard work, but it was very satisfying. I've learned to see the importance of noticing an interaction, a little bit like entering, when I'm working with someone, a little bit like entering the gaming world. And this is how I try to often explain to people, people that when I start working with them and saying how solutions-focused brief practice could be useful to them, is that it's like entering somebody else's world and helping them to spot clues in their environment to be able to function really well, and in sport, if wanted, to move up to the next level. And you know, in the gaming world, of course, you progress through levels, and one of the ways that you progress is by interacting with people around you successfully, and spotting the things that are in the room or in your environment that you can use to help you move on to the next level. So for me, this is quite a nice analogy for explaining what I'm doing, or what I can do with young players, predominantly young players. I've only worked with a few individuals as adults. This is a photo of my old team as they are now. Sadly, no longer a Premier League team, but life goes on. And what I wanted to move on to now was to return to the you at your best, but how it's evolved for me now that I've realized that the whole interaction side of exploring, if you're playing this way, what difference does that have on him or her? Then I realized that I could start exploring or asking the same kinds of questions with small groups of people. What are you collectively, which is actually returning to the original example of Paul in Sweden. You know, he was asking, I think I'm right in saying, a group, either the whole team or certainly a group of players. And so I started exploring doing that too, and asking the same kinds of questions. What would I see when you, as a group of defenders, for example, are performing at your best? And you know, what does it take for you to do that when you're playing so well, when you're locking out the other team strikers? What does it take? What impact does it have? What are you most proud of? And the benefits I've noticed of this, it seems to touch the parts that other beers don't reach. It's incredibly motivating for players to hear each other describe what they're good at, because not only as a collective they describe that, but they will of course make reference to each other individually and the difference they make to each other. And that doesn't really happen very often, if at all. That can create a sense of bonding. I believe it improves communication generally as they learn to trust each other from that bonding. It creates a kind of accountability, because if players are saying out loud what they think they're good at, there's an implicit agreement that these are the standards we're able to play at, and this is what we want, this is how we want to play and the level we want to play at. So it can create an implicit accountability. I've seen some people turn that into an explicit accountability, where people can sort of pull each other up on, or when standards are dropping. I think I should probably say at this point that you know, nearly all the work I've been doing has been in a kind of very competitive, progressive, looking to move up the levels environment, rather than just the social side of sport. Though I think everything that we use for the solutions-focused brief therapy can easily transfer to social sports players. But just to put this in context, I've been working in environments that are pretty ambitious for progress. I think players talking out loud in front of each other about them at their best improves the chance of them noticing what works. It kind of always amazes me that even really top players are not always necessarily aware of what they do that works. And I'm not saying that they always need to, and I don't think we should be removing spontaneity. And with some players, they just react so fast. You don't want them to overthink anything. But often when teams are struggling, or a group, a set of defenders are struggling, going through a bad patch, it can be really useful to draw out from them what they're good at, because they've never actually really noticed that before. Paul, again, if you're still here and part of this session, I can't see who's here when I'm on show screen like this, but I took this from Paul's book, Simple, Paul and Mark McCurgow's book. The action is in the interaction. When you can explore the differences people make to each other, something important can happen that might not happen if it was all just kept as what's happening to one person only. So here's here, for example, if you are working with, in football, a group of defenders and the goalkeeper, and you ask questions such as, Chris, tell me what you see when Robin is at her best. Draw out the qualities that Robin has, and then start to explore what difference does it make to you when Robin plays like that. And for Robin to hear the difference she makes to Chris when she's at her best can have a huge impact in terms of morale, and people will say, wow, I honestly didn't really know that I made that difference to you. And to have that surfaced is incredibly useful for the reasons that I mentioned on the earlier slide. And asking questions such as, what does it enable you to do? So it's not just a morale thing or a motivation thing. It can actually be a technical thing as well. So if somebody is winning all the headers as a centre back and dominating all of the headers, what that will mean for the teammates or the defenders around them, there is a technical difference that makes to them in terms of their positioning. And that can be used usefully too. And then exploring what's the knock-on effect of that, or what's the ripple effect of that, and exploring, well, if you guys are playing that way and you're helping each other, the difference you're making to each other is this, how does that flow over into the midfield then? What difference will they notice, and what difference does it make to them? So really there's a rich area of asking questions about difference that's useful to the players when you operate in a group like this. And then a really nice thing to do is to introduce adversity when you're at your best. So asking, when one of you is having a bad game, how do you help each other? When you're at your best, what would I see? What difference does it make? So rather than just always exploring or having the idea that everything's rosy and working and, you know, isn't that wonderful, which we know isn't the way life is. And it's obviously not true in sport either. Everybody can have an off day. A whole team can have an off day, but you can still explore. Supposing all of you are having an off day, but mentally you're at your best. What would I see that told me you were still functioning with the best mindset to get you through this bad game? There's great value in that. And here's another one with in adversity. You're playing against the hottest strikers in the league and you are at your best. What would I see that told me that you were at your best? What else would I see? What else, what else, what else? And what difference does that make? Who would notice? And I find that always an interesting one, because then they can start to describe the difference they believe they're going to have on those strikers, because the strikers would notice them at their best. Getting them to verbalize that can be a really positive priming for going into that game. Time is rushing away, so let's just look at something you could take straight into a training session that I've enjoyed using. In my breakout room, I was mentioning that it takes time when I start working with individuals and teams and small groups. And I'm sure of those of you that have done the same with solutions focus, you find that to begin with, people kind of just don't get it and they're puzzled why you're asking particular questions. And it's certainly no exception in the circles that I'm moving in. But I often want the players that I'm working with to really dial in and concentrate in training. So it'll either be me or one of the other coaches introduces and explains the training session and what's going to happen and how it's going to benefit them. And then I'll ask the question, this may be a question like this: when the session is over, what do you want to be most proud of the way you performed? And I sometimes get them to answer that out loud. Sometimes they can just think for themselves, but I want them to have an intention going into the training session. I don't want them to just come and train. These lads are quite ambitious and want to move up the levels. And so I want them to train with intention to help them do that. And then halfway through the session, I'll stop and just say, okay, briefly, are you on track for being proud of the thing you want to be proud of? Is there anything you need to adjust in order for you to be more confident of being proud at the end? And it resets them and refocuses them, and in order to have an even better second half if the first half hasn't been as great as they want. And then at the end of the session, what are you most proud of? Was it what you wanted? Or was it something else? And what I do is I actually don't go into the area of, no, I really wasn't proud of myself and it was awful. If there's something else they were proud of instead because of the dynamic nature of training, then let's use that for them going away from training with something to be really positive about. I'm going to move through that next example because I want to finish with this slide here, and I know I'm going to need to go fast to not hold you up. I've looked at some techniques and some things that I've done, and I hope that for those of you that work in sport, these may have been useful to you to take straight away or adapt. But there are more important things about solutions-focused brief therapy and the difference it's made to me. And that's the way I see my players now. And I come to work with them with different assumptions, and here are the assumptions that I come with. Every player is doing the best they can and has very good reasons for what they're doing right now. They are the experts of their own lives and their experience of the world around them. Even though I've got a very strong background in football, I still consider them in their context to be the experts of their world. And I'm useful in helping them notice and make use of what works best for them. I've got better at seeing their strengths, and I'm a better listener as a result of solutions-focused training and learning. And there are no difficult players. No one is uncoachable. It's my job to ask questions that are useful to the player's development and their desired outcomes. And this is so different from how I used to approach. Oh, and there's one there left. Everyone has what it takes to make the changes they need. So I come with these assumptions, and it really does change the whole approach the setup of the kind of conversations I have. And that's it. I'm sorry I had to rush on at the end. I'll stop sharing so that I can see you to thank you and say goodbye. So I hope that that's been useful in some way or interesting, food for thought, whistled through quite a lot. But thank you so much for enjoying this session, coming to this session. I'm contactable on morganrlewis@ntlworld.com if anybody wants to follow up by email. There are other bits and pieces that I've written that I'm more than happy to share. So do get in touch if there's anything else I can do.